They fired me while the world was watching. No warning, no closed-door meeting. Just a smiling executive, a blinking red camera light, and a carefully worded transition announcement during a live stream that had already pulled in over 80,000 viewers. I stood just off camera, still holding the USB drive with the latest system patch, the one I'd stayed up 3 nights finishing. And there she was, Harper Vance, Dynasphere's new golden girl, thanking me for my contributions to legacy infrastructure, like I was some footnote in a textbook no one reads anymore. The crowd clapped, confetti dropped, a ring light flickered, and I felt something inside me go completely still. 16 years, hundreds of sleepless nights, one system that powered half the company's digital infrastructure, gone in under 2 minutes of corporate theater. People in the chat were cheering, calling it bold, progressive, saying it was time for a fresh perspective. None of them knew the truth. Harper didn't just replace me. She was about to launch a system she barely understood, and she had no idea what I had built beneath the surface. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where in the world are you watching from? And be honest with me. Have you ever watched someone take credit for something you gave everything to build? Leave a comment if this hits close. Your story might just help someone else feel seen. My name is Elena Rourke. I wasn't always the kind of person who stayed late at the office just to double-check someone else's deployment log. But over time, I became her. When you spend over a decade building something from the ground up, when your code runs in the veins of $1 billion infrastructure, you stop seeing it as just a job. It becomes muscle memory, almost personal. I joined Dynasphere when we were still renting half a floor in a converted warehouse in East Austin. Back then, there were 7 of us. No HR, no snack lol, no corporate slogans printed in neon on the walls. Just caffeine, arguments over data models, and a lot of faith that if we built something solid, it would matter. And we did. I architected the company's first secure transaction pipeline, then the second. By the 3rd rebuild, it was handling over 30,000 real-time data requests a minute. I slept under my desk more times than I can count. I missed birthdays, weddings, funerals, including my father's. He passed the night I stayed behind to fix a silent overflow bug before a major client demo in Tokyo. I never told anyone. It wouldn't have changed anything anyway. People called me committed, reliable, a rock. They meant it as a compliment. I used to take it as one too. But somewhere along the line, that steadiness, it stopped being seen as strength. The board started using words like agile, disruptive, fresh vision. And I could feel it, the shift, like I was becoming part of the furniture. Useful, but easy to replace. Still, I kept working. Because for me, it was never about titles or raises or whose name got printed in the investor deck. It was about the system, keeping it alive, keeping it clean. So when I sent that final warning email flagging a breach path in the new launch module, I wasn't trying to be difficult. I was trying to protect the thing I helped build. What I didn't know was that the real threat had already logged in. The first time I saw Harper Vance in the office, I thought she was someone's guest. She walked in like she already belonged, heels clicking across the tile, hair camera ready, sipping something with oat milk and lavender syrup. No laptop, no badge. Just a phone and the kind of confidence that doesn't wait for an invitation. I later found out she wasn't a guest. She was our new strategic innovation advisor. I didn't even know we had that position. She didn't come from infrastructure or product or anything that required building systems that don't break at 3 a.m. She came from brand strategy, had a massive following on tech Twitter, once gave a TEDx talk about narrative-driven innovation in the cloud economy, whatever that means. The CEO called her a visionary, said we needed a fresh voice to reframe how we think about scale. What he meant was someone flashier, someone younger, someone who looked better on stage next to venture capitalists. Soon after she started making changes, My team's title shifted from platform engineering to dynamic experience lab. The whiteboards were replaced with color-coded sticky notes, and every Monday began with a curated playlist and something she called Vibe Sync. She referred to my legacy system as industrial clutter, suggested we rename our core framework to something brandable like NovaStream or EchoNode. I wish I could say I didn't care, that I just kept my head down and did the work, but I did care. Not because she had ideas, but because no one asked whether her ideas were safe. People started avoiding eye contact when she entered the room. Even the CTO Marcus began backing down in meetings. I once overheard Harper telling a group of interns, "Elena's great." She's like, "Our history, but we're building the future." They all nodded, and I stood there 3 feet away, feeling more like a footnote than a foundation. The real shift, though, it came one morning when I logged into the dev console and saw something I hadn't authorized. It happened faster than I thought it would. The morning after the live stream, the one where Harper stood next to the new product prototype like she'd written every line of it, I walked into the office like nothing had changed. Or maybe I just pretended nothing had. Same elevator, same badge swipe, same hallway I'd walked for over a decade. Only this time, something felt off. I sat down at my desk, powered on my monitor, and waited for the usual boot sequence. But instead of the dashboard, I got a blank screen. Then a spinning icon. Then access denied. I blinked. Thought maybe it was just the VPN. Tried again. Invalid credentials. I opened my laptop. Nothing. Opened the backup admin panel. Locked out. Slack. Locked out. Git, removed from repository. Email, session expired. That was when my hands started to shake. I reached for my phone. The Dynasphere app crashed on launch. My badge still got me in the building, but digitally, I no longer existed. No warning, no transition plan, just erased. I looked around. The floor was unusually quiet. A few people glanced up, then quickly looked away. No one said anything, not even Marcus. It wasn't cruelty, it was fear. No one wanted to be seen talking to me, not when Harper was reshaping the company culture in real time. And I knew what they were thinking. Don't get involved, stay out of it. Maybe I would have done the same if I were them. But what they didn't know was that I had already seen this coming, and I hadn't been idle. As I reached into my bag to unplug my personal charger, I felt it. Cold, solid. A matte black USB drive. I'd always called it a backup, but that morning, it started to feel more like a key. I moved through the office like a ghost. No one said anything as I gathered my things, not even the people I'd mentored, laughed with during late-night rollouts, or covered for when deadlines slipped. They weren't being cruel. They were just surviving. At Dynasphere, silence had become the safest language. The desk I'd sat at for 11 years was already being eyed by someone from the design team. I could see it in the way they hovered nearby, pretending to reorganize a stack of printouts. I didn't blame them. Office space was always tight, and once you're gone fast. I was halfway through unplugging my charger when I felt it, that unmistakable feeling of being watched. I turned my head slowly. There, by the copier, near the back wall, stood Priya Mehta, our intern, barely 3 months in, fresh out of Stanford with a laptop full of enthusiasm and a heart still unguarded. She was holding a stack of onboarding packets frozen mid-step. Her eyes locked with mine for just 1 second, and in that second, everything passed between us. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I saw it in her face. The shock, the quiet sadness, the shame of not knowing what to do. She looked like she wanted to say something, but the words never came. I gave her a small nod. Not goodbye, just understanding. Then I zipped my bag shut and turned away. That glance stayed with me longer than anything else that day, because even in a place that pretended nothing had happened, someone saw me. And I knew deep down that Priya had seen something else too. Not just a departure, but something unfinished. That USB drive had weight. Not just the physical kind, the smooth, matte black casing and the faint click as it slid into my palm, but a different kind of weight. The kind that comes from knowing something no one else in the room even suspects. I didn't plan to need it. Not really. At least, that's what I told myself when I first started building it 2 years earlier. Back then, I'd begun to notice the cracks, quiet ones, a shift in priorities. The board talked more about perception than performance. There were conversations behind closed doors I was no longer invited to, and the word simplify kept showing up in strategy docs next to things I had spent years making complex for a reason. So I started a project of my own. I called it System Delta. To everyone else, it was a testing branch, a hypothetical optimization for future scaling. But under the surface, it was something entirely different. A mirrored infrastructure with independent load management, adaptive routing, and a compliance backbone designed to meet every global standard without compromise. But most importantly, it had one rule built into its foundation: no one could run it without me. Biometric locks, voice confirmation, a private key seated offline. Not for control, not out of ego, but because I'd seen what happened when inexperienced hands pushed live code just to meet a headline. I didn't tell anyone about Delta. Not Marcus, not even Priya. It wasn't meant to be dramatic. It was meant to be safe. Now, as I sat alone in my apartment later that night, the drive resting on the table in front of me, I realized something. They thought they had replaced me. But the system they were about to launch wasn't the one they thought it was. It was everywhere. The live stream, the press kit, the hashtags, #MiraOS launch was trending on every major platform before I'd even finished making coffee. Dynasphere had converted the second floor into what looked more like a product showroom than a tech lab. Blue LED lights pulsed behind glass panels. Custom banners lined the walls with slogans like, "No legacy, just future." I recognized the font. It was the same one they'd quietly swapped onto the engineering wiki a month ago. At the center of it all stood Harper. She wore a lavender suit, polished and sharp, holding a wireless mic like it was a TED Talk. She smiled for the camera, standing just in front of what used to be the systems terminal, now rebranded as the experience dashboard. And behind her was the shell. They were launching it, the stripped-down, lightweight version of the system, the one that looked clean in demos, responded well under low-load simulations, and had just enough performance baked in to appear real. They called it MiraOS, but I knew exactly which build it was. I had written it for testing only. I watched from my apartment, the volume muted, my eyes following every line of the interface like I was still part of it. I wasn't angry, not yet. Mostly I felt numb. Harper's voice played on a short captioned loop. This platform was reimagined by a team that doesn't look backward. It's fast, scalable, and completely unburdened by legacy. Behind her, I spotted Priya. She was holding a tablet, eyes down, shoulders tight, like she already knew something wasn't right. But it was too late to stop it now. They were celebrating the launch of a system they didn't understand, standing on code they'd tried to erase. And the worst part? They hadn't even launched the real one. It started quietly, a missed confirmation ping in the Tokyo dashboard. Then a lag spike on a European onboarding flow. Minor issues. Easy to overlook if you weren't paying attention. But I was paying attention. The passive monitoring script I'd tucked deep inside the old diagnostic framework, buried far enough to be forgotten, legal enough to still be running, was feeding me live error logs. No alerts, no pop-ups, just raw signals trickling across my screen. At 11:42 a.m., the first critical came in. Client load timeout, US node unresponsive token exchange, Singapore, auto session rollback triggered, Germany. I refreshed the dashboard. The numbers didn't lie. Something was unraveling. Not violently, not all at once, but like a seam pulled loose in a pressure suit, one thread at a time. From what I could see, the system wasn't crashing. That would have been cleaner. No, this was worse. It was degrading. inconsistent load behavior, session leaks, anomalous routing patterns that didn't match any of the approved flow trees. Someone in the building must have seen it by now. But if they did, no one said anything. The launch party was still in full swing. Harper was still smiling in front of flashing cameras repeating sound bites, while Miros quietly chewed itself apart in the background. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd replaced the core diagnostics with animated success indicators, scrapped redundancy in favor of streamlined UX, and now the ghost of a system they thought they'd buried was whispering, frame by frame, that something had gone very wrong. And then, right on cue, a new log came through. This time, not from a system node, but from a Git commit. Origin Delta Framework, author Rourke E., timestamp October 18th, 0713. Someone had pulled the wrong version, and the architecture was starting to remember who built it. Inside the Dinosphere War Room, things weren't festive anymore. The LED lights were still glowing, and the banners still hung from the ceiling, but no one was looking at them. Instead, a crowd had gathered around 3 monitors, all flashing the same message in soft red: authentication failed, owner ID missing. Marcus Brandt, the CTO, was standing still. His hand hovered over the keyboard like he wasn't sure what command to type next. Around him, engineers whispered, pointing to logs, pulling up rollback scripts, trying and failing to regain control. The system wasn't just glitching now, it was actively resisting them. Access tiers were vanishing in real time. Recovery modules wouldn't load. When someone tried to trigger a forced reboot, the console returned a flat error: root authority revoked, contact registered architect. I watched it unfold through the ghost channel, one log at a time. My fingerprint, my voice print, my name embedded in every compliance hash they'd agreed to 18 months ago, when legal still read contracts carefully. They'd launched Delta, and Delta didn't recognize them. They hadn't launched a product. They had triggered a lock. Marcus finally spoke, quietly but firm. Who last signed the deployment key? A silence followed. One of the senior engineers pulled up the metadata. His voice cracked as he read, Rourke, Elena Rourke. I leaned back in my chair, eyes still on the screen. They hadn't just fired a person. They'd fired the only key the system would ever trust. And now the question wasn't how to fix it. It was whether they had the nerve to ask me. By early afternoon, the whispers had turned into questions. Questions no one wanted to answer. Investor hotlines were lighting up. Clients were reporting system timeouts in waves: New York, Berlin, Seoul. And inside the building, the mood had shifted from confusion to something heavier: exposure. It started with a log, simple, time-stamped, and damning. A Git commit from 3 days before launch. The deletion of the AI integrity block. 47 lines of behavior mapping logic. Gone. The reason listed: redundant, slowing down front-end flow. The author: Harper V. Admin. Someone had pulled the audit trail, and now it was being read aloud in the boardroom. Across the table, Harper sat stiff, phone face down, fingernails pressing into the arms of her chair. She didn't speak. Not when Marcus confirmed the deletion, not when the legal advisor said the removal violated internal protocol, and certainly not when the video surfaced. 32 seconds. Captured on an intern's phone during a closed prep meeting, Harper leaning casually on a desk, iced matcha in hand, saying, "We're cutting the diagnostics. No one outside this room will know. If they ask, just say it's alignment approved." She even laughed at the end. By 2:30 p.m., that video had made its way to the investor channels. The same people who had applauded disruption were now demanding answers. Marcus didn't say much. He didn't need to. The system logs were speaking louder than any PR statement ever could. And the real damage wasn't just technical, it was trust. That was the price. And as for the proof, it was written into every broken line of code they'd tried to streamline. Back in my apartment, the alerts were still coming in. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I just watched the system do what it was built to do. Remember, refuse, protect itself. And somewhere in the quiet space between collapse and consequence, someone finally asked, "Can we still reach her?" By late afternoon, the banners had come down. Literally. Someone removed the Welcome to the Future sign from the main entrance. The LED strip behind the executive wing had been turned off, and the media team, once buzzing with energy, was nowhere to be seen. Inside the boardroom, the silence was no longer polite. It was thick, unavoidable, like the moment before a verdict. The emergency session had been called by Langford Capital Dynasphere's second largest investor. Their European partners had all lost access to the platform just hours after lunch, and they wanted answers, not apologies, not reassurances, just names. Everett, the CEO, sat rigid at the head of the table. Harper beside him, pale and quiet. Marcus stood near the door, arms crossed, holding a printout, metadata logs, deployment signatures, timestamps. He didn't look at Harper. He didn't have to. Langford's representative, a woman named Marion Crane, leaned forward and asked the only question that mattered. "Where is the architect?" Everett fumbled. "Our team is currently assessing." "Not the team," she interrupted, "the one who designed the system, the one who locked us out." There was a pause, long, sharp. Then Marcus finally said it. "She's no longer with us." Another pause, and then, like a switch flipped, Crane turned to legal. "Get me a copy of the original IP clause. We need to know exactly what we're up against." In the corner near the back of the room, someone spoke for the first time all day. It was Priya. Quiet, measured, but steady. She didn't take the system with her. She was the system. No one left. No one disagreed. Outside that room, the system was still locked, still sealed, and inside they finally understood. They hadn't fired an engineer. They had removed the foundation. And now the only way back was through the one person they'd erased. They reached out eventually, not with flowers, not with apologies, but through legal counsel and a very carefully worded email. They wanted access, not forgiveness, not conversation, just access to the system they couldn't touch anymore, the one that was still running, still stable, but completely out of their control. I didn't respond right away. I sat with it for a day. Then another. I reread the contract I'd quietly structured 18 months earlier, the one that tied every root credential, every node signature back to me, not as an employee, but as an architect. And in that silence, something shifted. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. I declined their offer, politely, firmly. Then I opened a different email, a speaking invitation from a summit in San Jose, Technovate West. Engineers for engineers. No champagne, no PR team, no fake applause. Just people who still believed that what you build should be stronger than who's trending. A week later, I stood on a stage under soft white lights. Behind me, Delta, now rebranded as Rourke Framework, ran live on a secure stack. Uptime? Steady. 0 failures. I told the room, systems don't collapse because they're old. They collapse when trust is treated like a variable, something optional, disposable. No one clapped right away. They just listened. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to explain my worth. It was there in every silent line of code that held its ground when everything else fell apart. I didn't win. I outlasted the noise. And maybe that's enough. What about you? Have you ever been treated like a legacy right before everything broke without you? Share your story if you're ready. Someone out there might need to hear it.